to all of us
That's
together.
actually also teaching for me getting on board, but never mind.
I would say that we learn together what we mean by PBL, and that's how they did it. I mean, that's how they did it at McMaster,
Yeah.
to build it together as this group of 5, involving the whole community, even involving the whole town that they were in.
Yeah. I put on your second statement, your second thesis.
I just wanted to comment on this one.
Yes.
Because I was also intrigued by the word attack. I don't, well, it's your life, it's your community who feels or not attacked. It's not mine, I'm in business. But I ask you first the question, do you feel attacked? Or do you just feel that you promote something different, something new, and face normal resistance? And in anything new we promote, we face resistance. I would not say we face attacks. But even this, I was not aware of that Danish story that was just mentioned. For me, I classify this as a resistance. Each time you challenge the system has the right to counter-challenge you. And vice versa. So that's my comment on attack. Because, and I wanted to make it because from an employer's perspective, if I look at what industry likes, and I think Aalborg is a shining example of that. They are your supporters. Industry recognizes the value of PBL. I keep meeting with people in industry telling me, we and you, because you promote tools for us, should promote also, so that they start a list of attributes. And if you put that in front of PBL, you have almost a definition of PBL. So the notion of attack versus the word of employer, I think, is inappropriate.
You prefer resistance?
Well, resistance, who is resisting? It's the education system who is resisting. The employment system is supporting. This system is not aware of PBL. A few people who are interested in education and industry, and not all of them have time to be interested in education. A few of them who know PBL would support PBL. Those who do not know PBL, if they would be explained what it is, I think would support it.
I think your statement of caution is correct, and we take it to heart. From there, I would like to jump to the second statement that Jenny made, because it opens, and basically the first line says it all. The foundation of problem-based learning is trust. Can I see hands? Who believes this to be true? Foundation of problem-based learning is trust. Is there anyone here who does not believe? Can I see a hand?
Here.
Okay. Okay, can you explain why you do not believe, but we all believe that trust is the foundation of problem-based learning?
Well, I'll start with a joke which I think I've already told my friends that there were 17 professors in a plane which was about to take off. And as soon as they announced that this plane was designed by your students, 16 of them moved out because they knew that it was going to crash. Only one remained. And when they asked the professor, why are you not moving out? He said, oh, I know my students. It will never take off anyway.
Trust.
I know.
Trust the
This
incompetence.
is what I want to tell you. My kind of student, I know them. They like this collaborative working together, tutorials and whatever. Why? Because they don't want to wait to use their brain. They want to share their little, sharing, whatever. They don't want to punish themselves thinking. And actually it is what I call innovative kind of thinking. They like coming together, not because they want to work together, but that they don't want to use their energy. And the moment you leave them in class, you never find them there. A minute you leave, there will be nobody. So I don't know. I mean, there should be a different way of tackling things, actually, depending on, I don't know. For kids, we have what we call massification. A lot of students.
Yeah.
When my faculty started, it was about 500 students. Over the years, we are talking about 10 times. So the ratio between lecturers and students is quite a lot, and even the kind of students which we have quite different. So 1980s, you leave the students to tell them tutorials, start doing tutorials, they do it, and on their own. This time around, if you tell them tutorials, the first thing they do, they come together. Because they haven't done it, and they want somebody to do it. They know in a group, there's somebody, there's a brain who can do it. Now, really we need to wait. PBL has the advantage, I know that, but there's some sort of control which one has to do in order to ensure that at least in a
Okay,
group.
as long as we can agree that trust is the foundation for problem-based learning, that the teachers need to trust the ability of the students to come up
The
with
thing
solutions,
will never
then the next question is, how can you uncover this trust? Your second, Mona, after.
Yeah, I have got a question, but let me talk about this trust. You know, I'm asking myself, is the trust, teachers trusting the students or students trusting themselves? There are two kinds of trust.
Yeah.
Do they trust themselves?
That's
Because
strongly
this
related.
is yes, very
Yeah, I think
strongly
it's
related.
How would you comment on that, Jenny? Trust for the teachers or trust for the students?
Well, what I've noticed now that I'm tutoring for first-year students is that by me trusting them, they learn to trust themselves. And before they're looking to me like, what should I do? What should I learn? What's going to be on the exam? But if I tell them, I know that you're interested in this, I know you can look this up, I know you can do this. They begin to see it for themselves, and sure they make mistakes, but by having a very humanist approach, I think, to their mistakes, and telling them their mistakes are not punishable or not, that they will not have to face eternal consequences, but they're just part of the learning process, they begin to trust in themselves more. And I saw this, I actually was here looking at a couple of groups from the engineering and from psychology, doing their self-study for the projects, and I was amazed by the level of maturity and the level of self-endeavor displayed by these students. I don't know what you did to them, but they clearly seem to have this trust thing on board.
Can I ask my question? Sorry.
I thought you did, but
No, this is just, I just wanted to comment on the
okay.
trust.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, because you gave us a historical, it concerns both phases. What is the essence of this philosophy? Is it, what triggered it, the very first time? Is it the ability of the student to learn, or is it relevance of the knowledge to the society? Because these both are changing.
Well, that's a very complicated question.
And we
I
don't
think
want you to get another
unless we
lecture
understand this, unless we understand this, we cannot be reconstructing the philosophy. We wouldn't know how to reconstruct it.
It's not as simple as one or the other, I would say.
I would say this is an excellent question to continue discussing after the session.
Yeah,
Shall we
see
keep
my
it at that
PhD
for the
in
moment?
here.
So then we can move to Mona, and after that move on to the next team.
Yeah, this was also, my comment was also to this issue about trust and your skepticism about your students. A good friend of mine in Makerere University, she's using PBL to her students. And she doesn't actually do much in terms of introducing the students to the PBL model, like what Javier was describing before, and what we do in this university with our first year students, telling them about what we are doing and why we are doing it, and what are the advantages seen from their perspective, etc. She doesn't do much about that. She writes them like half a page that they have to do a problem-based project in connection with her course. She's teaching telecommunications, and the students love it. And she says that the results she gets from her students are quite quite impressive.
Trust does
So-
not mean that you leave your students to sort out things on their own without any help. Trust means for me that you know they have the ability to do it. But I also know that students, like any normal human being, they have a lazy side. They have other priorities. So if you just leave them to sort out things on their own, a lot of them will end up nowhere. So you need to guide them, push them, confine them.
If I could complete what I was trying to say, Erik, I think that it has got a lot to do with how you formulate your learning outcomes. Now, we were talking about outcomes-based education before. And if you have formulated clear and explicit learning outcomes, telling the students what it is they need to be able to do in order to pass the exams. I mean, passing exams, that is the one main issue in students' heads. They want to pass the exams, we all know that. So, if by passing the exams, they actually achieve the competences that we want them to achieve. And if you have specifically explained to students what it is they need to achieve, then I think you can trust that they will work towards achieving that, because they would want to pass the exams. And so what I'm talking about now is the good principle, also by John Biggs, of constructive alignment. And here again the word trust was used, because one of my master students in the Master in Problem-Based Learning, he once said that the whole idea of the constructive alignment between the teacher's intentions, the learning outcomes, the assessments, and what the students is learning, that's all about trust. Not the trust that we trust the student to be capable of learning, but also the opposite way around. The students can trust us as teachers that we will help them, through our teaching, learn what they're supposed to learn in order to be able to pass the exam. So it's an issue of mutual trust between teacher and student. And so I definitely believe that trust is a key word in any kind of education, for that matter, not only PB though.
We have that agreement. I think trust is crucial. It reminds me of a story someone once told me about a Sufi master who was traveling through the desert with a lot of followers, and they came to an oasis at the end of the day. So the Sufi master gives his camel to one of the followers, and he is taken care of, he is being fed, and he is brought to a tent where he can sleep. And the next morning he comes out of the tent, he has breakfast, and then he starts looking for his camel. And the camel is gone. And he tries to find this follower, and he said, "Yesterday I gave you the lead of my camel. What did you do?" And the guy said, "Well, you know, you always tell us, trust in Allah. So what I did, I brought this camel to the water, and then I trust in Allah, and now the camel is gone." And then the Sufi master, he was thinking a little bit, and then he said, "Okay, next time I ask you something like this, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel." So that's complicated, trust. Shall we move to the next image? Sophie. Are digital techniques not diverting engineering students from understanding reality? Solving real-life problems? It's putting a question mark to all the beautiful things you showed us.
I asked it because sometimes I'm asked this question. And I have a pre-prepared answer, so if you have the question, I will just...
Shall we ask him this question? Yeah, it's okay.
No, the question is to the audience, because
I had a little bit that feeling when I was listening to your presentation. I was actually thinking, this is a lot about form, and doesn't it take away a little bit? But on the other hand, I mean, my 11-year-old son, he's doing everything on the computer, and I'm sure he would be fascinated about the way some of these systems that you were showing. So maybe it's just that I'm old-fashioned, that I'm too old to reach. Maybe some of these necessary.
I will comment on this one because I like it. You said it's all about form. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that was a little bit my feeling.
Yeah, okay, I understand that.
You do?
But would you accept if I translate a little bit your distort a little bit your sentence by saying this is all about understanding what other people think. When we think about technical objects, material objects that do not exist and that we have to make happen together, it's our role as engineers. We need to talk about these objects. Don't you think this is the most appropriate way to talk about it?
Yeah, yes. No, no.
That's the only meaning it has. It has no other meaning. Talking about things, it's not video games. Video games show you computer models of things that hopefully will never exist. We are talking about computer representations of things that have to exist because that's the job of the people who are looking at these computers. So I'm convinced, and I think there is no better form of sharing ideas about objects that do not exist than a 3D realistically behaving computer representation.
No, but I'm also fascinated about it. Maybe I should just get more acquainted with it.
I'm always afraid that students learn from working with these simulations that when something goes wrong, you just push the reset button and you can start from fresh.
Exactly. Yeah. No one.
I will comment on this one, but
Okay, my experience.
the lady had a question before.
Yeah, I'll try to be a bit quick. When I travel the world to do PBL, whatever, consultancy, etc., I quite often, especially in the poorer countries, are met with the argument why people cannot do PBL in that particular place. That is because the internet connection is not very good. And then my answer to that is a counter question. How good do you think the internet connection was in Aalborg in 1974, where we started doing PBL? And so then we start thinking maybe a little bit more about what is technology there for. I think I would not be afraid of digital techniques as long as it is a demand to the students that they are working on a real life problem. Not a simulated 3D virtual life problem, but a real life problem that concerns real life people who, if they pinch their arm, they can feel that they are alive, and you can prick them and blood comes out.
Yes.
So as long as they work on a real life problem and they work with real life stakeholders of that problem, then they can use as many digital techniques as they want in order to try to find information that will benefit them in their solution of that problem. I would not be afraid of that. But the
So
demand
the-
would be,
little
they're doing a
elaboration.
real life problem, they are doing real life data collection by walking out and talking to the owners of the problem to find out what's their opinion.
One aspect I didn't mention in the presentation was the social aspect. I told that I had no time to address this one, but we could have a discussion on this aspect. The second point you make is about the connection with the reality. And again, because we are not talking about video games, we are talking about objects that will exist. At some point of time, all this virtual stuff has to be reconnected with the reality. And the only thing we try to promote through digital techniques is the notion of right first time. It's never right first time, but it's an objective. The objective being that whatever they will be doing in the reality, they will have gone through a process of pre-validating the maximum of things that can be pre-validated. That's what it means. So I gave you another example, what's called the cyber-physical. This notion of cyber-physical is currently infusing in most engineering practices. It comes from systems engineering, and it is part now of many other engineering disciplines. And it's nothing but combining the virtual and the physical world, not replacing one by the other. So we could have a whole conference on this subject. You, Eric, said something. Just remind me. Undo, the undo button.
Reset. The reset.
The reset or the undo. I would say it's the same. If you tell a student, you do something on the computer and then it's done, he tends to work that way, without the sense of responsibility of, will this virtual plane crash? I don't care about the plane crashing or not, it will crash in the computer, it's okay.
Yeah.
If the exercise is design it, maybe not an airplane, make it and test it, because we keep this link permanent with the reality. If that's the exercise, yes, the responsibility of the student in front of the screen will be different. Of course, they will not all make airplanes, but they will have to make an object that will tell them you have been successful or not. So there is some undo during the virtual stage, and as you progress, there is less and less undo possible. Gentlemen had a question.
I think you have said it all, actually. You need to attach physical and virtual.
Yes, absolutely.
Otherwise, students, I mean, in engineering, when you talk about engineering, we're talking about hands-on experience for people, for students to be able to
A
understand.
pure hands-on engineer is a tinkerer, not an engineer.
What do you mean?
If you are only hands-on, if you learn only
Both.
by doing,
Both.
you are not an engineer, you are a tinkerer. If you are only learning by virtual, you are a video gamer.
Of course, it has to be both. You have said it. You have said it all.
Yes.
For them to have a trust on whatever they're doing, they have to have both. And that this comes from my experience when I'm doing a subject called dynamic testing with machine tools. You can do it by simulation. But if you do it practically, things becomes different. You know, they know it, and they could even trace whys.
Exactly.
That's when they come to understand the whys.
When you do that, you teach them something more. You teach them to feel and understand the difference between the theory and the practice, between the virtual and the real. And by doing so, you give them the understanding of why it is important for them to understand those two things. So you contextualize the purpose of doing both by telling them, look, your model here, who seems to work, is not exactly behaving like that in the reality. Yes, there are many differences, and the differences contain a lot of learning.
Thanks.
Xavier, your second thesis is more related to success of problem-based learning, and you connect that, or you connect a problem to implementing problem-based learning to the disciplinary nature of academia.
Yes. But I think the question is silly because I preach to an audience by asking that. You
could rephrase the question like, what can we do about this?
Yes, I mean my question is silly, not yours.
You see, that's so charming with it. Always.
In discussions here, I had another feeling, more general than this one. What triggered this thinking is when I learned that, I didn't know before that, students here involved in projects have their own rooms. This is shocking. It's shocking from, you have the computer starting to compute optimate additions and multiplications about the cost of that stuff. How did they do? So this adds one more element in the question of governance. We have the governance in terms of teaching, convincing faculty to go across different disciplines, beyond their own. That's number one. I have no time. I have to focus on my research subject, So it suggests also that specialized research is an enemy, to speak your language, of cross-disciplinary teaching. This is one dimension of governance. How do you manage in a school the happening of PBL against obstacle, not a means of the teachers defending their disciplines. Number two, money. How you make it happen if you don't have the money to, are these rooms, specialized student rooms, each of them their own? Is that mandatory to make PBL happen? If not, what is a low-cost PBL version? So these are just thoughts. But what I think is there should be sometimes a conference on governance of making PBL happen in institutions. Where a dean's conference or a president's conference, whatever, people who have to decide and to find the money for making, and the money and managing, for making it happen in an institution. It was a reflection from my 2 days with you, but it was a little bit beyond this question of cross-disciplinary subjects.
I think you hit a nerve. I saw questions coming
We
up.
have a first lady here.
Yeah, but if there are others, I mean, we should know.
You were first in time.
Okay. No, it's. I'm just picking up on your question about the shocking experience of finding out that students.
There were quotes in my shocking.
Yeah, no, I know. But I was educated here, and I had the benefit of having our own room for the group and so on. And I think it was a very vital element of being able to practice PBL the way we at least practiced it at that time, that was within SAP, within the social sciences and so on. But then I started working as an external examiner at Roskilde University. The other big thing, the other fantastic thing according to your history of PBL. And I found out that they had done away with the group rooms. When I was a student, we visited them, and they of course had their rooms just like we had at Aalborg University. But 15 years later, they do not have the capacity to have rooms for all the students, to have their own rooms. So what they do is when they're doing the group process, they use the canteen, they use all kind of areas at the university, and then the students, they meet in the apartments in Copenhagen or in cafes and everywhere. And they still practice, and they still have a university based on the PBL model, but actually they do not have the physical conditions to offer the students the same facilities that we have. So it's just to say that this model is very flexible, and it will adapt itself to a lot of things. I'm not saying that's an ideal situation, but it's what is taking place. And your question about the disciplinary segmenting, I think that maybe we should be careful about not hvile på laurbærene. When you feel so comfortable that you've made a success. Yes, we have made PBL a success. Yeah. Then others may be overtaking you from a different point of view. And the University of Copenhagen right now, they have established a new global development education, building firmly on strongly disciplinary trained people, economists, sociologists, and so on. But they're mixing things in a new, different ways. And I mean, it's the main challenge for the international studies at Roskilde University today. So I'm just saying that disciplines may not be a complete enemy, or whatever you want to call it, of PBL.
There were quotes around this one.
Yes, I know. No, I'm using it like that as well.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
The answer to your how can it be overcome, or at least one answer to your how can it be overcome, you could find by looking back in history in this university where you are now. First of all, you are in a department that used to be an interdisciplinary department with people from social sciences and people from the technical and engineering sciences, all mixed within the same department. So that's one element of it, that lecturers, teachers were mixed in the daily environment. And the other element was that we had a matrix, and we actually still have to this day, although it doesn't work as well any longer, we have a matrix organization within the university as such, where you have the study programs, one being the rows, and then you have the different departments, which are the specialized disciplinary departments nowadays. We don't have very many interdisciplinary departments any longer, apart from Department of Learning. But then you have the departments as the columns in this matrix. And so the study program directors, they could pick somebody from this department and somebody from that department and somebody from the next department in order to feed in the interdisciplinary inputs needed for the interdisciplinary and contextualized real-life problems that students were working with. So that model actually worked quite okay. Until 16 years ago, we had a first-year program that was completely interdisciplinary in the sense that any student who came into the Faculty of Engineering and Science, they would be mixed with any other student who had asked for entrance to this particular faculty. So there would be a group with an electronic engineer, mechanical engineer, land surveyor, a mathematics student, a physics student, whatever. They would all be within the same project group, trying to do their project as an interdisciplinary project. That was then made away with, and that was actually one of the attacks that I find that Ginny was talking about before. It was one of the attacks on the truly interdisciplinary PBL model that we used to have in this university. So it's definitely easy. I think you can easily find models on how to overcome the disciplinarity within in departments. To your other issue, the one with the group rooms, not so very far from now, we will not have group rooms for each and every student's group within this university, within this faculty. Right now, I think we have, but in social science faculty for many, many years, they have not had their own group rooms, and still they are doing PBL. So I agree completely with what Margrethe just said. You can easily find models whereby PBL can still be surviving, so to speak. I don't see that as a major attack. I see more the political issues as major attacks.
I think we stick to the interdisciplinarity or the disciplines, because I think that was one of the themes that Korea also encountered in her challenges to introduce problem-based learning. So I would like to skip to her topics. And I think we start right at the top, PBL, all or nothing. Can you do PBL halfway? Can you do PBL in one course and then in the other courses you do traditional teaching?
Or hybrid PBL.
Yeah.
Anyone cares to comment? Mona? But maybe we ask someone else now first, because
Somebody else,
I think you have an opinion on everything and you're the most experienced person in the audience. We would like some other people to share too. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Charles. I think in your presentation you gave that to the half hybrid PBL. So are you now saying that hybrid PBL is null and void?
I'm not saying that, I'm asking you, because I've seen people who are very passionate about PBL, but when they do not get their way, they just abandon it.
You don't actually do hybrid PBL though, because you started from a position, you kind of had a progressive approach to PBL.
Yes.
You started off from one course and then another course.
Yes.
Hybrid PBL is more courses that are lecture-based, and then for good measure we'll add 1 or 2 problems or 3 problems in the year, mostly for accreditation purposes. What Hayo is doing is slightly different.
Yeah.
You're progressively winning over the entire university.
Yes. I'm taking the gradual approach because I don't have the power. When I go back, in between this trip and my trip to the US after this, there's going to be a curriculum review meeting, and they've asked me to do that. So I'm proposing a proper curriculum-based approach, although it may not cover the whole curriculum, but we need to think of a more structured and better approach to PBL. But there's also the opinion that, and I've seen this happening also, like when there's one isolated person doing PBL, the impact on that person doing it is really quite terrible. And there's also some opinion that says that if you cannot do PBL the whole way, then you might as well not do it. And I think this is a question for people who are new to trying to implement PBL. And you have to know what are the challenges that you have to face. Should we wait for everybody to agree about PBL to try it? Or should we try it a little bit at a time?
In some places, they actually had that as a strategy. In architecture in Newcastle, they implemented problem-based learning, and the dean who proposed it, he indicated that he wanted everyone to agree. He wanted at least consent from everyone of the staff. So they had to wait till one person was on a sabbatical in the US before making the decision. But yeah, there was a...
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking whether PBL is applicable and desirable across all disciplines. I'm thinking about basic science. I know most of you are engineers here. You can relate to physics. So what does that mean in terms of basic science, PBL, problem-based learning? Unless we have not clearly understood what the problem really means. Because is it a societal problem? Because basic science is about producing knowledge, important knowledge, but not necessarily for the use today, but future. And I'm also thinking whether PBL is not preventing future thinking, which is very important, and opportunities rather than problems.
Who would like to take up this challenge? You can pass it on to some of the colleagues.
So in the Erasmus University College, in the first year we use PBL for 18 disciplines, all of which are based around the liberal arts and sciences, all of which you would consider basic sciences, or liberal arts, which includes philosophy, sociology, economics. And we use the so-called medical or 7-step method of PBL across all of these disciplines. I find the challenge does not come from the discipline itself or the problems associated with the discipline. The challenge only ever comes from the more senior members in these faculties, so the full professors in economics or whatever, who are more used to a traditional way of doing things and are a bit resistant to the idea or have problems understanding how to formulate their traditional course in a more problematized way. But the disciplines themselves are no object. If you look at Maastricht University, they use PBL across every single faculty that they have. So there are entire universities that do PBL across the board, and I believe Aalborg also does PBL across the entire...
Yeah. If you look in the history of problem-based learning, would you consider chemistry a basic science? Or do you only think of mathematics and physics?
No, I mentioned the physics because I know physics is very much related to engineering to some extent.
But chemistry is also...
so the engineers can
I would say chemistry is also basic science.
Yeah,
and one of the pioneers in problem-based learning that Jenny did not mention in his story, but you cannot mention everyone, is Don Woods from McMaster, who pioneered problem-based learning in a chemistry course, using the examples, showing students chemical reactions by showing them what he did, and then asking them to explain what they were seeing. So you mix some stuff, or you put some things together, then they see a change in color, they see smoke coming out, they smell something, and then the question to them is, can you explain what you just have seen? And that explanation starts the PBL learning process.
But then I think that's why I say we have to define this, what we call quote-unquote problem. Problem is because all the examples we've been seeing, the students' projects, is about societal problem. It's not, I hope you understand what I mean, that problem, because when you started actually historically, and that's why I asked you the question, the history, it was not problem. What was it? This kind of learning.
So McMaster was originally called small group problem-based learning, but Harry and I were just talking to each other that in the medical model, or the McMaster, or let's call it the McMaster model because in Maastricht it went beyond beyond medicine. The problems weren't so much about societal relevance. That's a very Danish thing. Or it also from the Brazilian Raymond model, they were also very much society oriented. But the McMaster model was very much more concerned with understanding the basics of disciplines. And so the problems from these curricula were really about what are the underlying processes of biology, of chemistry, of law, of economics, and not so much about how do we make this relevant to society. And I think actually that's something that our Dutch model could learn from the Danish model, which is how to make this more relevant to society.
I think what you mentioned is that we should look at the definition of problem.
Yes.
And
yes.
I do not think that we should look for one definition to capture all. I think we should recognize the diversity. And in this diversity, in the Olberg model, it is relevant to have real problems or realistic problems, authentic problems. In the master's curriculum, they're not looking for real or authentic problems. They're looking for relevance. They're looking for how often something occurs in practice. So they're looking for different attributes of the problem. And we should include all of that in our definitions. I think Jelle and then Mona.
Just a comment on this. When we work together with students, we also define, problems in a positive sense. Not only that somebody has some kind of unsatisfactory situation, it can also be a potential. And it lies actually very deep in the Scandinavian and German understanding, borrowing from US and Mills and the thoughts about sociological imagination, changing things for better by proposing something new. So actually this brings in all the creativity, and I have students working what we call a top-down process analysis by thinking, creating something new, and then it becomes, okay, how can we appropriate this into society? But that's another starting point. And then you have the third kind of the problems, the more neutral problems, which we simply do not know. What are the potentials? What are the risks? So we do not know. So that's where you come to basic science. You have to have more knowledge in order to be able to act and make a change more broadly.
Actually, it totally depends on who you are trying to teach and what you want to achieve. So there's always ways where we can design problems. It may not be a problem in the case of a problem that is real, but there's always ways to find it. Even like Eric was saying, finding out the reasons behind a phenomena, that can also be a problem. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Mona?
With the very ideal PBL model, again going back into history, with the very ideal PBL model that was sort of first coined here in Denmark, the idea was that students would themselves try to identify a societal problem and work on that. And then sometimes, if they really, okay, here is really a problem that motivates us strongly and we'd really like to work with it, and then they would start analyzing this problem, and then maybe this group of students from within the Faculty of Engineering and Science would find out that the best and most ideal solution to this problem would actually be to make a change of the legislation or some sort of thing, or doing a training program or whatever. I mean, coming up with a solution that had nothing to do with engineering, but which would be truly the best solution. So then we modified and became a bit more pragmatic and said, okay, we need at least to somehow stipulate a framework within which these problems have to be. And we have to somehow have an idea that the problem will be solved by a solution that's got something to do with engineering. So gradually we have had a process of narrowing down our very broad definition of what is a suitable problem for a PBL curriculum. So, and some of them are very narrow nowadays. For 25 years in Department of, no, that's not true, for more than 40 years in Department of Electronic Systems, they have had a problem called build a hi-fi amplifier. And that does not really contain very many social aspects. And they're not asked to look for economics as well. So.
Okay. Are you all exhausted, or are there still some comments and questions?
There are more.
There are some statements. Should we try to convince all of the staff, or can we just work with an advanced group?
We do that already at Aalborg University.
Now you puzzle me, because I thought Aalborg University was the PBL
Yeah, but
institute, so everyone is PBL here.
no. There's still some renegades inside the university.
They're the enemy. They try to attack us. Or they are the resistance.
So you have some hidden enemies?
But I actually like Hadia's second last statement, the balance between idealism and pragmatism. Being openly idealistic, and I see an idealist and Hadia sitting next to me here, and the pragmatist sitting on my other side.
Yeah.
It's a tough balance, especially in a time when we're asked to balance budget sheets. You know, it's hard to be an idealist when you don't have the money to do these things. And when you look at the time where PBL was incepted, it was a financially more prosperous time, and it was explicit in McMaster's founder that they had money to do this. And the first oil crisis was in '73, so Roskilde was founded before these problems really hit. And so it's very tough in this modern world where we're pressed by very competitive pressures to budget cuts and producing more with less. It's very tough to keep any sort of idealism, but ultimately I don't know whether we can do PBL without some form of idealism. I don't know what you think.
I think sometimes we need to be pragmatic too, because it's like, how can I say this? Sometimes we cannot get, even if we cannot get 100%, trying to get 50% first is also fine. And putting in the foundations, knowing what is important to get first, and then starting to build up. Because once you have something on the ground, it's easier to persuade for more, rather than not having anything at all, and then expecting everyone to give you 100%.
But I see in you a long-term vision, like you have a long-term vision for education. You think about how to make this survive in the long run. I would say that's quite idealistic and inspiring in a sense.
I don't know. I was thinking that's more pragmatic. I'm trying to make it work within the constraint. I think all of us have to understand that we have constraints. And I think when I was talking about culture, it's also, the constraint is also part of culture. The culture of the institution, the culture of the bureaucracy. And if we don't understand the culture, it's very difficult to get things moving.
Yeah, but
So
I would say in terms of hope, we need both the dreamer and the doer.
Yes.
Otherwise, we won't get around.
Yeah. You have to have a vision, but then you have to sometimes surrender that idealistic part in order to get something moving.
Temporarily.
Yes.
Okay, class, we are in borrowed time now. And you want to use that.
Oh yeah, can I hear about maybe the experience, how she started actually in Malaysia? Did you start with the top management to convince them that there's something happening in here and that we need to adopt it so that maybe students or whatever benefit? Did you start talking, you have to convince them, did you convince them? Otherwise, with our kind of situation, if you start with the PBL on your own, and if a certain student pays, you'll be actually on your books.
Actually, when I started PBL, I told the head of department, I told quite a lot of people that I'm trying this. So they knew.
Without the university machinery?
Without what?
The university machine, the Senate and
Oh,
the
the Senate, no. That doesn't involve the Senate because the first time I tried it, it was only 4 weeks. So that was a micro implementation. And that was also the first time I'm trying. But you have to understand that before that, I was already implementing cooperative learning. I was already implementing team-based learning. I knew how to facilitate my students. And they were already happy with their teammates. So by the time I gave them a problem, they already knew how to work together in a team, in a learning team. So that was not a large jump. And I managed to get them to really understand, and I did a small study. In fact, I wrote a paper on this. That after that 4 weeks, I did a survey and I asked them, what do you feel? Were you able to learn this? Should we go on, should this be done in other classes? Well, most of them say that, most of the smarter students say that they don't like PBL, but it should be done. And we did it in 2 courses. The other course, the students are repeaters, so they were not doing as well as the students in the other course. And they say that PBL taught them how to learn. PBL taught them how to trust themselves. So this is back to the trust thing. And the fact that we were not telling them what is really ultimately the truth, what is the ultimate correct answer. They managed to get the answer, and they could see their ability. So after that 4 weeks, I was convinced. I started doing it. I started expanding. But of course there were problems. But the thing that saved me, and of course there's this love note sent to the upper level complaining about PBL. But the thing that saved me was that I was doing research in my class. So I could show what's happening, that the complaint may be from 1 or 2 students, the others were just fine.
Evidence.
Yes,
That's
evidence.
what we're looking for. Evidence for our ideals. That is a pragmatic way to deal with ideals. I think we need to bring this to a conclusion. I would like you all to join giving a hand to the panel. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you all for sharing in this group session. Thank you for coming to this symposium.
Thanks for sharing.